Welcome to MSFS on Xbox Series S. This video will explain some of the differences between the PC and Xbox versions during a full flight in the Airbus A320. By default, the Xbox uses the lock control scheme, which makes interacting with buttons and switches much easier with a gamepad. For example, here we're changing our desired cruise altitude on the MCP. This is of course much slower and more awkward than using a mouse to directly manipulate those controls on PC, but does compensate for the reduced amount of buttons available on a console and means players don't have to invest in keyboard and mouse peripherals. Heading down to the pedestal, we click the parking brake off and it's time to fly. The throttle is controlled by buttons on the control pads. It's a digital increase-decrease throttle switch instead of using the analog shoulder buttons like some arcade flight games. Takeoff is easy to control with the left analog stick. The sensitivity seems well tuned, and the fly-by-wire controls of the A320 of course simplify things further. It's a little tricky to move the view around and flick switches while you're flying the plane. Something that is 3 or 4 button presses on PC becomes a little overwhelming on console. I almost forgot to put the gear up here. Although the fly-by-wire A320 mod was removed from the Xbox marketplace, the default Airbus performs well enough for casual pilots. It levels off at top of climb correctly and follows the plan set out in the relatively full-featured FMC. You can of course set custom cameras on Xbox just like you can on PC to make it easier to reach common airplane buttons. As usual, we set our final descent altitude ready for top of descent and enjoy the view until then. The scenery looks just as good on Xbox, and the console's SSD means that scenery tiles load in smoothly without stuttering. At top of descent, we activate managed altitude mode and the airplane begins its descent towards our destination. As we configure the airplane for landing, I'm looking forward to the experience of landing by hand with an Xbox controller. Oddly, there are some stutters during recording on Xbox, which is surprising given the SSD storage, but maybe the Series X would perform better. We let the airplane acquire the localizer and descend on the glide slope. On final, as ever, we disable the autopilot and start to fly towards the runway by hand. At first, you don't really need to make any adjustments as the fly-by-wire keeps the controls straight and descending on the 3-degree slope. It would be very easy to make wild overcorrections on an Xbox controller with the short throw analog stick. We start to make some small adjustments as we get closer to the runway. To correct for a slight crosswind, we'll listen in to the landing callouts until touchdown.
100, 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, retard, 5.
A little bit of over-flaring there on the control pad, but a good touchdown in the default A320 on Xbox Series S. Thank you for watching this short look at MSFS on Xbox through the eyes of a PC player. I hope you found it interesting. If you did, please drop a like and feel free to subscribe for more regular flight sim content. Take care and I'll see you next time.